In a significant development in the ongoing trade tensions between the United States and China, senior officials from both nations are set to engage in high-stakes discussions in Switzerland this week. This meeting comes after President Donald Trump imposed unprecedented tariffs on Chinese imports, raising the stakes in a conflict that has rattled global markets and disrupted supply chains. With tariffs soaring to 145% on U.S. goods and 125% on Chinese exports, the upcoming talks could mark a pivotal moment in efforts to de-escalate the trade war. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer are scheduled to meet with Chinese Vice Premier Lifeng from May 9 to 12, signaling a potential thaw in relations between the two economic powerhouses. This meeting is the first formal acknowledgement of negotiations since Trump's tariffs were enacted in February, stirring hopes for a resolution. The U.S. Treasury Department confirmed the meeting, stating it would focus on rebalancing trade relations as both countries grapple with the repercussions of their tariffs. Bessent emphasized the administration's commitment to economic security, stating economic security is national security, and President Donald J. Trump is leading the way both at home and abroad for a stronger, more prosperous America. His remarks underlined the administration's view that tariffs serve as a tool for negotiating fairer trade terms, despite criticism that such policies may ultimately burden American consumers. The backdrop of these discussions is one of mounting economic pressure. Recent data highlight a notable decline in U.S. imports from China, with warning signs emerging from major ports about dwindling inventories. Gene Soroka, executive director of the Port of Los Angeles, indicated that retailers might soon face severe shortages, with only 5 weeks' worth of inventory remaining. This situation could trigger price increases and further supply chain disruptions across various sectors. In a notable response to the escalating tensions, China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs confirmed Lifeng's participation in the upcoming talks. The Chinese government has been engaged in its own economic adjustments, recently announcing policy changes including interest rate cuts aimed at bolstering its economy amid the trade war's fallout. Analysts suggest that these measures reflect China's intent to stabilize its economic landscape while entering negotiations with the U.S. Simultaneously, there is a cautious optimism in the markets. Despite the crippling tariffs, Asian market indices displayed only modest fluctuations, indicating a degree of resilience among investors. The Hang Seng Index and the CSI 300 saw slight increases, while U.S. futures also reported gains, suggesting that traders may be banking on a potential resolution to the trade standoff. However, skepticism remains. Bessent clarified during a recent congressional hearing that while discussions with other major trading partners are ongoing, formal negotiations with China had not yet commenced. This statement raises questions about the sincerity and readiness of both sides to engage in meaningful dialogue. In contrast, President Trump has openly expressed a willingness to negotiate, hinting at possible adjustments to tariffs if it leads to a favorable outcome for the U.S. As the world watches closely, the outcomes of these talks could reshape not only U.S.-China relations but also the broader landscape of global trade. With both economies at a crossroads, the next few days could set the tone for future interactions and influence international markets. The stakes are undeniably high, and both nations must navigate the complexities of economic diplomacy carefully if they hope to avert further escalation in what has already become a contentious trade war. In a pivotal moment for global trade, high-level talks between the United States and China are set to commence this Saturday in Geneva, marking the first significant engagement since the onset of an escalating trade war. The outcome of these discussions could have profound implications not only for the two largest economies but also for the global economic landscape. With tariffs reaching as high as 145% on Chinese exports to the U.S., both nations are under considerable pressure to find a pathway toward de-escalation. The atmosphere surrounding these negotiations has been charged as the U.S. under President Trump has implemented broad tariffs aimed primarily at China, prompting retaliatory measures that have included counter-tariffs on American goods. This tit-for-tat strategy has resulted in increased uncertainty in markets worldwide and has raised concerns about a potential recession in both economies. As Trump's administration prepares to engage Chinese officials, the stakes are higher than ever. The Chinese government has taken proactive steps to stabilize its economy in anticipation of these talks. The People's Bank of China announced a half-point cut to the reserve requirement ratio for banks, aiming to inject 1 trillion yuan into the banking system. Governor Pan Gongsheng emphasized that these measures were a response to a global economy fraught with uncertainty and trade tensions. "We must adapt to the changing landscape," he stated, underscoring the urgency of the situation. As China grapples with the ramifications of the trade war, its economy faces significant challenges. With exports to the U.S. still accounting for approximately 15% of its GDP, the severe tariffs have begun to take a toll. In addition to interest rate cuts, the Chinese government is focused on boosting consumer spending, particularly in the struggling real estate sector, which has historically been a backbone of its economy. Notably, property sales by floor area dropped by 3% in the first quarter of 2025, with investment in the sector declining by 10%. Analysts, including those from Capital Economics, suggest that while the monetary stimulus measures will likely yield some positive effects, they may be limited due to demand constraints. The main issue is not supply but rather a lack of consumer confidence, they noted, pointing to the broader implications of an uncertain economic environment. As senior officials from both countries prepare for their discussions, the focus will likely be on finding common ground to reduce tensions. China's Vice Premier Lifeng is expected to meet with U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, marking a significant step in what many hope will be a thawing of relations. However, skepticism remains about whether a comprehensive trade agreement can be achieved in the near term. In conclusion, the upcoming talks in Geneva represent a crucial juncture for U.S.-China relations and the global economy at large. Success in these negotiations could pave the way for a more stable economic environment, while failure may exacerbate existing tensions and economic difficulties. As both nations navigate this complex landscape, the world will be watching closely, aware that the consequences of their decisions extend far beyond their borders. The future of international trade hangs in the balance, and the outcomes of this weekend's discussions could ultimately shape the economic trajectory for years to come. Recent satellite images have unveiled a massive construction project in China, raising questions about the country's strategic intentions and military capabilities. This development comes at a time when geopolitical tensions in Asia are escalating, particularly between India and Pakistan, as well as between the United States and China. With the global power landscape shifting, the ramifications of China's actions and the evolving arms dynamics in South Asia could have significant consequences for international relations. The construction project, which is still largely shrouded in mystery, has sparked speculation among analysts and governments about its purpose. Satellite imagery analyzed by experts shows what appears to be a vast facility that could potentially serve military or strategic interests. The timing of this construction is critical, as the world witnesses increased military maneuvers and alliances reshaping in the region. The implications of such a development cannot be underestimated. In parallel, tensions between India and Pakistan have flared once again following a tragic terrorist attack in Indian-controlled Kashmir. This incident has reignited military posturing in the region, with India taking decisive actions against Pakistan. Historically, both nations have maintained a volatile relationship, and the current geopolitical climate influenced by outside powers has made the situation even more precarious. The U.S. has increasingly leaned towards India as a partner in countering China's influence, while Pakistan has deepened its military ties with Beijing. Data from the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute highlights a dramatic shift in arms procurement patterns. India, once heavily reliant on Russian military hardware, has transitioned to sourcing a significant portion of its arms from Western allies, particularly the United States, which now plays a central role in India's defense strategy. Conversely, Pakistan has become increasingly dependent on China for military support, further entrenching the divide between the two nations and their respective allies. Analysts like Ashley Tellis from the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace emphasize that these changing alliances are reshaping the security dynamics in South Asia. The U.S. is now central to India's security interests, while China increasingly plays a comparable role in Pakistan, he noted. This evolving landscape poses risks of miscalculation. As both nations are armed with nuclear capabilities and are prone to military missteps which could escalate into larger conflicts. The historical context of arms sales further underscores the shifting allegiances. During the Cold War, India relied heavily on the Soviet Union while Pakistan was a frontline ally of the United States. However, the end of the war in Afghanistan marked a turning point for both nations. As U.S. strategic interests in Pakistan waned, Islamabad turned to China for military support, effectively realigning its defense priorities. Meanwhile, India's pivot towards the West has been marked by significant military upgrades and modernization efforts. As tensions rise, the risk of conflict grows. The 2019 military engagement between India and Pakistan serves as a stark reminder of how quickly situations can spiral out of control. The U.S. has expressed concern over the potential for miscalculations in the region, especially given the hyper-nationalism that characterizes both nations. Former U.S. defense officials warn that even minor incidents such as cross-border skirmishes could have catastrophic outcomes. As we look toward the future, the implications of China's large construction project and the shifting military alliances in South Asia will be critical to monitor. The interplay of these developments could redefine the security architecture of the region, with the potential for increased military confrontations. The global community watches closely as the actions of these nations unfold, aware that the trajectory of these relationships could shape international stability for years to come.